Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Asian American Chamber of Commerce webinar. Today's topic is CARES Act updates and PPP loan forgiveness recommendations. My name is Stephanie Shea. I'm today's moderator. I work at M&T Bank in Business Banking Division. Also, I'm the board chair of Asian American Chamber of Commerce. AACC is very excited to host and partner with the SBA again, along with a law firm and accounting firm. I'm very pleased to introduce today's panelists. We have two gentlemen from SBA. The first one is Mr. Libo Sun. Libo is the supervisor of marketing and outreach team at the Washington Metropolitan Area District Office. His team provides assistance to small business in counseling, training, events, project management, lenders relationship, and contracting supports. Libo is also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. The second person is Mr. Rod Johnson. Rod holds a position as Lender Relations Specialist and Small Business Development Center Project Manager. Rod was a commercial lender for 20 years, a business owner for more than a decade, and now is with SBA, so I'm sure he knows inside out. Ms. Sherilyn LeBon, partner of Dunlap Bennett Lewick Law Firm. Sherilyn's practice areas cover business, government contracting, and nonprofits. She is also a popular speaker on many events. Sherilyn has 20+ years of experience. She was a high-ranking official at the SBA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and as an advisor to members of Congress and presidential candidates. With her experience guiding clients through the requirements of the SBA and Treasury's new CARES Act. Mr. Harold Mon, CEO of UHY Advisors, Mid-Atlantic MD Inc. Harold has more than 30 years of experience providing comprehensive audit, tax, and financial consulting expertise to a wide range of industries. His company provides services to meet the needs of clients ranging from small business owners through the Fortune 500. All right, before we start, a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation. Number one, we will record today's presentation and share it afterwards. 2, we will mute your line and turn off your web camera due to a large group of audience. 3, if you have a question for our panelists, please feel free to send it in chat room. And the last, we would like to encourage everyone to share today's webinar with your social networks. Finally, I'd like to thank AACC's board members fully support, especially to Dr. Cindy Shao, the president of Asian American Chamber of Commerce. Cindy has been working tirelessly to put many webinars with different topics to serve our community. Without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our panelists. First, let's have SBA to share the updates of CARES Act PPP forgiveness. Libo and Rod, over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I'm glad to be a part of this afternoon. Of course, I have an update because as of Friday, President Trump signed into law the PPP Flexibility Act. Now, this act actually modifies some of the terms and conditions of the original PPP program that was rolled out under the CARES Act on April 2nd, 2020. But before I actually get into some of the nuances of what's new under the PPP Flexibility Act, I want to actually give you some numbers or data that you may find interesting. The first thing is the SBA normally processes about $30 million worth of lending in a year. In 2020, we have done nearly $600 billion in loans in about 6 weeks. That's a lot of money in 6 weeks to go through banks, credit unions, and fintechs. So although when the original program was rolled out back in April and we had some fits and starts, I mean, when you think about it, $600 billion running through the financial system in 6 weeks is a lot of money, okay? And so for you guys that are out there that are business owners, we really appreciate your patience in receiving your money. Now, how many lenders participated in the program? 5,458 lenders actually approved $4.531 billion in loans. What that equates to is $511.382 billion. Now remember, between PPP-1 and PPP-2, the money is $660 billion that was appropriated to help small businesses across the United States. And so right now, if you do the math quickly in your head, you have about $130 billion left worth of money that's out there to help small business owners. Now you need to apply because banks will stop accepting applications on June 30, 2020. So if you haven't applied, now I'm encouraging you to go ahead and apply with your bank. So now who were some of the top who were some of the top PPP lenders across the country? Well, you had JP Morgan, who did 256,000 loans for $28.6 billion. Okay, the average loan size that they processed was $111,000. Wells Fargo Bank processed 171,000 loans for $10.1 billion. The average loan size was $59,408. Then Bank of America processed 325,000 loans for $24 billion, and the average loan size was $76,517. Now, you heard a lot about the community banks being able to process the loans faster and credit unions. So the banks that had under $1 billion in revenue actually processed $82 billion worth of loans. And then your credit unions with less than $1 billion in assets processed $2 billion worth of PPP loans. So the community banks and the credit unions were also active in getting PPP loans actually approved and funded. Now, let's look at the DMV. So in Northern Virginia, there were 101,000 PPP loans done for a dollar amount of $12.3 billion. In Maryland, there were 74,612 loans processed for $9.8 billion. And then in Washington, D.C., there were 11,421 loans in the amount of $2.1 billion. So the streets of the DMV are paved with greenbacks from the PPP program. So now let's get into some of the changes under the new PPP program. If you recall, 75% of the funds had to be used toward payroll, with the remaining 25% used for utilities, rent, lease payments, interest on a commercial mortgage, business internet, business telephone, gas, electric, and water. Under the new program, now only 60% of the loan funds need to be used for payroll, and the remaining 40% can be used for utilities. The second change, instead of the money having to be used 8 weeks after funding from your bank, now you have up to 24 weeks to actually use those funds, which actually take us out to December 31st of this year. So now I think that's a great thing, because a lot of times, employers couldn't bring back their employees in 8 weeks, and so they need additional time. Well, the adjustment to the PPP has now allowed for a business owner more time to bring back employees. Now, remember, just like under the original program, there are no personal guarantees, there is no collateral that's required. There's a slight change in the interest rate, anywhere from 1% up to 5%. Now, I would imagine in the next week that we will see a new PPP application, a new PPP forgiveness application, and we will see a new interim ruling. Usually those things take place on a Friday, at the end of the week, and they usually come out at 5:00 p.m. And so I'm anticipating that new information to come out, and then I'll be rolling that information out to the various financial institutions and the different resource partners that the SBA has. And so with that, those are all the updates that I have at this time.
Lebo, do you have anything to add?
Yes, first I want to thank you, Stephanie and Cindy, for inviting us, SBA again. We have participated in the few sessions, both in English and different other languages. So, and I'm just very pleased to have Rod join me for this session today to give you more in-depth discussion and the updates regarding the PPP loan. And we're looking for, maybe Q&A sessions and interactive exchange. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Lebo. Sherilyn, you want to share something from your end?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I want to thank the Asian American Chamber of Commerce once again for holding this webinar and having me speak. I just want to reiterate, not sure that we gave a disclaimer earlier, but I want to give a disclaimer that what the remarks we're giving today are for educational purposes and not to be taken as legal advice. Just to follow up on some of the things that Rod has pointed out with all the new changes with our new PP Flexibility Act, there are a couple of things that I think all borrowers need to keep in mind, and I just want to give 3 top-line points. So remember when you filled out that application that there were a certain number of certifications that you affirmed when you filled out your application. And I think it's really important to keep in mind as we go through these changes and you think about doing forgiveness in the next coming months, is that you keep in mind that you are and have used those funds for which they are intended, right? That they were intended to pay your employees or yourself for payroll. And we need to keep that in mind as we move forward with our forgiveness. And also keep in mind a couple other changes. Originally, about 4 or 6 weeks ago, the Secretary of the Treasury did say that those borrowers who reached a $2 million cap and above can expect to have their loans reviewed and audited. We didn't know what that audit looked like, and we didn't have details on the review. We still don't. However, and the recent guidance that came out, it was actually in the Federal Register on June 1st, SBA did make very clear that through their loan review regulations, that SBA can audit any loan for any amount within 6 years after it's been forgiven or repaid in full. So what that means to you, the borrower, is that you really should plan on retaining all of your paperwork on your loan forgiveness, calculations, and in your loan overall. Really doesn't matter when you've repaid the loan, but just remember that you want to retain paperwork for a good 6 years because SBA does reserve the right to re-examine that paperwork and any loan forgiveness documents. Another thing to keep in mind, and this was also laid out in the guidance, is that there will be some incidences where perhaps your bank does deny forgiveness for whatever reason, and you do have the right to appeal. However, that appeal process is not yet been revealed to borrowers, and just know that details on the appeal process is also forthcoming. And my final point that I want to say to everyone on the call is really continue to document not just your loan forgiveness documents and your loan documents, but overall, any information that you have that went into your reasoning as to why you applied for the PPP loan. It's a very good idea to retain emails, any other information that would go into your economic uncertainty arguments, any reasons why you were worried about being able to retain your employees. It's just a very good idea to retain as much of that information as possible because you might need it in the future. And that is all I have to share this afternoon. Stephanie, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Sherilyn. Yeah, thanks for your legal advice. Harold, you
Yes.
want to say something now?
Yes, sure. Yep. That'd be great. As the last speaker, I feel like I'm the one that goes on before lunchtime, and I'm the last guy between the presentation and all the questions getting answered. But I'll only take a few minutes. Just a couple things I want to just kind of make sure we've covered, and kind of piggybacking on what's also been said is that, Sherilyn said, keep all your stuff for 6 years. One thing to keep in mind is it's really 6 years. If you didn't have your loan forgiven, it's 6 years from the time you paid off your loan. So it actually could be a much longer period of time that the SBA could, in theory, come in and look at. And, one of the other things is that, just to keep in mind, is that they increase the maturity on any loan you're left with to up to 5 years. I think Rod had mentioned that the interest rate, there's some changes to that. But we want to make sure that you can get a longer period of time to pay it back. I think one of the things to always keep in mind is, as my life has been for the last 2 months, is the rules change every day. And I think, like Rod talked about, there was a statement put out by the SBA yesterday where they've basically said we're going to have a lot more information in order to make decisions as we move forward. One other piece that was changed through this updated act is the deferral period for payments. I think originally it was 6 months of deferred payments, so you wouldn't have to make any payments. Well, now they've extended that up to when your forgiveness application is approved. So that way, in theory, you may not have to make any payments on any of these. And so, a lot of these things are complicated. They're kind of accounting related, lots of terms, full-time equivalents, measurement dates. And I think we'll get into that with a lot of the questions that we have here. So I will no longer stand between you and the questions that we have. So Stephanie, I'll turn that back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Harold. We have SBA and attorney and a CPA, so you can ask the questions you have. I have collected some of the questions that people send it to me. So I'm gonna go through these questions, and maybe these are some of your questions. First question, since the PPP Flexibility Act has been changed, will the PPP forgiveness application be changed as well? Can we use the current one or should we wait?
You should wait because the PPP application is going to be changing as well.
Okay. And then when the new application will be out?
I'm not sure. Typically, new forms come out on Fridays at 5 p.m. So we're hoping it'll be out again this Friday at 5 p.m. But I can't say that for certain. I can't say that for certain because we know that all of you are anxious.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll wait. On the PPP forgiveness application, employees at time of loan application enter the total number of employees at the time of the borrower's PPP loan application. If business was closed and no employees at the time of the application, what's the answer for that?
So the idea of the program was to really, even if your employees were sitting at home, was for you to still have them on the payroll, whether you were open or not. So you should have been using those funds. If you received the funds, you should have been, paying your employees under the old guidelines for the 8 weeks period of time once you actually had your loan funded. Well, under the new guidelines, now that's been extended until December 31st. But under the original program, you should have, as soon as you received those funds, you should have been paying your employees.
Okay, do you recommend a separate account for PPP funding?
Absolutely. But Harold, I'll let you go ahead and speak.
No, I'm glad you said that, Rod, because we've been telling our clients that probably since this whole thing started is to, one of the ways, remember, you're going to have to provide all this documentation in the forgiveness package that's going to go to the bank and get approved by the bank and then head over to Rod and his group at SBA for their approval after the fact. So one of the ways, an easy way to make sure that the funds are only used on an expenditure that is allowed is by putting it in a separate bank account, keeping it there until you use it for these certain purposes. That way there can be no question. We tell our clients to kind of keep, for every transfer out of that account into your checking account to cover those expenses, we need to create a file to accumulate the documentation to prove that's what it was spent on. And it's a process. And the time that you take now to do that will save you time when you're putting the application together at the end.
And let me just add to reiterate what Harold is saying. Again, for compliance purposes, if you are going to have to deal with an audit in the future, you have got everything segregated in a separate account, and it will just make your life easier if in the future you're audited and you have to prove certain things. It just makes sense now to put in the time at the beginning.
And yes, for Sherilyn's comments earlier, keep information for 6 years, but for this fund will be used probably within the longest 24 weeks. And now we know we can all get online access. So you will suggest business owners to print bank statements
Sure.
and for record in case they
Right.
get it.
Correct. So you're quite correct, Stephanie. So if you decide that you would like to close that account that you had your PPP funds in, then the onus is really on you to print out all of those statements, because once you close the account, it is likely that you will no longer have access to that information. So again, print everything out, put it in the paper file, and again, you want to retain that for 6 years. As Harold pointed out, perhaps even longer.
Great suggestion. Next question. It's regarding the covered period from an 8-week period to 24 weeks. On the application, can borrower choose 8 or 24 weeks or any weeks in between? If a company does not elect the original 8-week covered period, but meets all the requirements for forgiveness at week 10 or 11 or 16, can they apply loan forgiveness at that time? Or do they have to wait until the end of the 24-week covered period?
All right, so the new interim ruling has not come out yet, so I cannot definitively answer that question, but it would seem to me as a practical matter, if you want to ask for forgiveness from week 8 or 10 or 12 or even after week 24, as a practical matter, it would seem that you would be able to do that. But again, at this point, the new interim ruling is not out yet, so I can't definitively say today that that's what you could do. So let's wait until the new interim ruling comes out, and then we'll have a definitive answer.
Okay. Next question. If there is no reduction, do I need to fill out the salary hourly wage reduction section on Schedule A? This Schedule A is a forgiveness application. It's not the tax return Schedule A.
Right, that's right. You want to answer that, Harold?
Yeah, sure. You're going to have to fill out Schedule A to kind of prove that you met all those requirements. One of the things you have to provide is, as part of your application, is detailed payroll information to show the bank and the SBA how you did your calculation to determine that you don't have a reduction in the forgiveness amount because you have the same number of full-time equivalents at the measurement dates in order to get full forgiveness. So yes, even if you meet and you meet, you have to prove that you meet, and part of that is filling out this Schedule A or attaching a calculation that kind of substitutes for Schedule A.
Okay. Next, payroll and non-payroll costs. On line 2, business mortgage interest payments. Is this a regular business loan interest payment or the PPP loan?
You're using the PPP funds to pay the interest on a commercial mortgage. That's allowed. That's a part of that new 40% of how you can spend the money. So it's rent, lease payments, or interest on a commercial mortgage.
Right. I think they can pay interest on other indebtedness that they had in place. The issue is that piece of it will not be forgiven.
Okay. Please explain the FTE reduction safe harbor and how to meet this. And also please explain step 1 to 5. I think this is on page 9 on the application, the current application.
Yeah. Yeah, and this gets into kind of how you calculate the fact that your full-time equivalents at one time and what you have at the measurement date allow you to not have a reduction in the forgiveness. And so there's a couple ways to do the full-time equivalents. And they're all kind of described. They're a little bit technical. One is related to 40 hours in a week as a full-time equivalent. Another is if somebody works 40, you assign them a 1. If they're part-time, you assign them a 0.5. And it's kind of complicated and kind of accounting-wise. I don't know that I want to take you through that here. I want to make sure we get to all the questions that we have, but yeah, you've got to go. Those 5 steps on that application will take you through those calculations to compare them to see if you have to reduce your forgiveness amount. And I think hopefully they'll give you some contact information. If you're welcome to reach out to me outside of this, and be happy to answer any questions in a little more detail as it relates to that, because it gets a little bit involved.
Yeah, it looks like the forgiveness application is more complicated than the application, this application.
That is true.
That is very true, unfortunately.
For bonus, it's fine if we give it as long as it is under 100,000 and annualized, correct? So that means they can, business owner can give bonus to their employees as long as it's under 100,000 annual salary, correct?
You can give a bonus to your employees within reason, all right? So I wouldn't be trying to give an employee a $90,000 bonus, but if it's, $1,000 or a $2,500 bonus, I'll even stretch it to say a $5,000 bonus. Okay, that's allowable, but I wouldn't go much over that. Now, Harold, you want to comment on that, Harold?
Yeah, I also agree. I try to get my clients to view things through reasonableness, right? So like you said, you can't give, if you don't give bonuses this time of year, you can't give a huge bonus in order just to use up the PPP fund. So that's an issue. So I say, yes, I would say that if it's, I've got some clients who are paying hazard pay as part of this process because their people have to work in kind of hazardous situations. And that's allowable per the regulations. So I think you just got to be realistic in what you're doing.
So it just has to be reasonable.
Yes, correct.
Can business owners give bonus to themselves?
You can, but I wouldn't advise it. It just wouldn't look good.
Right.
I think that they should just stick with giving the bonuses to the employees and not bonusing themselves, not during this period of time.
What's the easiest way to fill out the PPP forgiveness application? Which part should do first?
I'll let you answer that.
It's very complicated, so.
Yeah, I would say just start at the top and work your way down on each page, right? And then a certain lines are going to refer you to the other worksheets in order to be completed. I would recommend that you have your CPA or accountant or someone assist with it, because this is going to get reviewed at 2 different levels. The bank's going to review it, and then they've got to approve it. And then the SBA is going to look at what the bank did, and they've got to improve it. So the more information, the more detailed the information you provide, having your CPA help you do that is going to pay huge dividends in kind of getting through this process.
Okay. The last is probably for Sherilyn. Any legal issues, concerns business owners should pay attention, other than you said previously?
You know, no other issues except, again, make sure you're spending the money for how it is intended. Because if you are spending the money on, for example, IT upgrades instead of on paying your employees, that constitutes fraud. And the SBA can prosecute you for fraud, and that is what you don't want. So to avoid all sorts of problems, spend the money for how it's intended.
Okay, and we have some questions in the chat room, so I'm gonna just read it. I received $2,000 from Idle. I would like to pay that back to Truist since it is not forgivable. Can we repay portions yet?
For Idle, well, I guess I would ask, why did you take out the loan in the first place? Because you know the terms are 30 years at 3.75%, that you could have a forgivable advance up to $10,000 or $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees. All right, so now you want to pay the Idle back. Now the question is, for me, did you also apply for PPP? Because if you've applied for PPP and you're not going to use the PPP and the Idle loan for the same purposes, you can take some of the funds from PPP. For example, if you're just going to use PPP for payroll and you're going to use Idle for utilities, then you can take a portion of the PPP money, pay off Idle, and then all of it becomes forgivable under the PPP loan. That's the strategy that I would use.
I hope Rod answered your questions. Next question: when they use comparable FTE, if suppose we submit application for forgivable on 10th week, I think we answered that. It's a practical matter, correct, Rod?
Yep.
Yeah, we said it earlier, whatever the weeks. Next, what is the new FTE calculation and how is it different from the previous FTE calculation? Why would a company pay an employee for sitting at home?
I think I answered that earlier. What was actually the purpose of the PPP, right? Whether they were sitting at home or not, the PPP says, we want you to keep your employees on the payroll instead of them applying for unemployment. And so for an 8-week period of time, under the old guidelines, you had 8 weeks to keep your employees on the payroll and away from unemployment. Well, now that 8 weeks has been extended to 24 weeks, which goes out to actually December 31st. So as DC, Maryland, and Virginia are going through phase 1 and phase 2 openings, now you can bring those employees hopefully back into your place of business and eventually begin to ramp up your revenues so that you can cover your expenses. But the whole idea for PPP was to keep your employees on the payroll, whether or not they were sitting at home.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the payroll protection program. Next, if we elect 24 weeks, is all non-payroll costs could be covered cost for 24 weeks?
All right, so we know what the PPP program stipulates. The new guidelines say 60% for payroll, 40% for rent or lease payments, interest on a commercial mortgage, gas, electric, water, business telephone, the internet. Any uses outside of that would constitute fraud. So if you're thinking about hiring a new business development person, if you're looking to upgrade your information technology, or anything outside of the purposes that have been given for the PPP, then it could be considered fraud and you'll be going to jail. So stay within the guidelines of what the PPP program states. If you need money for expansion, so for example, if you're a bicycle shop, then, what's shocking me is bicycles are, flying off the shelves at bicycle shops and Walmart and Target and all these other stores. Well, if you're a bicycle shop and you're expanding, then under the CARES Act, there's something called debt relief. And you can apply for a 7A, 504, or a microloan so that you can expand, i.e. buy more inventory for you to sell or to hire more employees because of the demand for bicycle repairs and for salesmen to sell those bicycles. And by the way, under the debt relief, under the CARES Act, the SBA on your behalf will pay the principal, interest, and monthly fees to the bank on those SBA loans for 6 months. So if you're expanding, that's what you do. You don't use the PPP money for expansion.
Right.
Yeah, sounds very good. Next question. Since our loan went into our M&T Bank account, we just set up a separate liability account and not a separate bank account. I believe this will be sufficient.
A liability account?
What is?
All right, so I'm gonna put on my old cash management hat, okay? So you have the parent and the child account. So are they saying that they have now opened a child account, better known as a zero balance account, for the PPP funds to go into?
No, Rod, I think what they're saying is that went into their checking account and
Uh-huh.
they set up a liability account of where they're going to charge the approved expenses to, so they can track it that way.
Yeah, I think when you apply PPP funding and you receive the funding from whatever the bank, and you just open a separate account at that bank, correct?
So, all right. So are we talking, and Harold, you can help me on this. So it can actually be basically a money market account, a checking account, a savings account, just as long as it's a separate account.
Right. That's the key. And I think in the question, they were saying that they did not do that.
Okay.
But they're tracking the expenses kind of in a different way in order to show that they've spent it all on the appropriate things. I mean, if it's after the fact, I don't know that you can't go back and undo it. So,
Right.
You know, I just think it's not the preferred way to do it, basically.
All right. So then what they would do is they would have to print out their checking account statements and then actually highlight those transactions that were where the PPP money was used.
Yep.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay.
So can business owners to open, if they receive PPP funding from Bank A, can they take that money to open an account at the Bank B?
But why would you want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that I know the answer to that, but I think that at least in every one of my clients, they all basically, if they got the money from Bank A, they just had them deposited in a new account at Bank A, basically.
Okay.
Right.
It's so much easier.
Okay.
Much.
That's great suggestion. Next, so I was going to make a separate bank account, but my banker recommended otherwise. So should I just gather receipts now? I can't go back in time to create the account.
Okay, so what you're going to do, and we mentioned it earlier, is just for those transactions related to PPP, you'll highlight it in the banks on the bank statement.
Hopefully that answered the question. The money we received will cover 8 weeks. Should we submit the forgiveness application after 8 weeks?
All right, so let's wait until the new forgiveness application comes out. And then we can look at whether it's 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And also let's just wait until, you know, the new guidelines, the new interim ruling comes out, and we'll be better to answer that question.
Yeah, Rada, but I think my gut feeling is you're going to have to wait till the end of the year to submit a forgiveness application, because I believe the law moved the June 30th measuring date to December 31st, which is going to require you to wait till then to see if you have a reduction in employees. But like Rod said, we just got to wait till we get all the new regulations that'll come out.
Is there an issue to have a PPP loan and also receive an idle loan?
You can have
Yes.
both. You can have both loans.
When we applied for the loan based on the original 8-week cover period, the loan was intended to cover all of our employees. Now that we have 24 weeks, can we cover a few number of employees for a longer time and still request forgiveness for the entire amount, assuming we have the total required number of FTEs to qualify for forgiveness?
You want to answer that, Harold?
That was a long question. I'm trying to find it on the chat room so I can reread it.
I think this is sent through private message. So let me repeat again.
Okay, go ahead then.
When we applied for the loan based on the original 8-week covered period,
Mm-hmm.
the loan was intended to cover all of our employees. Now that we have 24 weeks, can we cover a few number of employees for a longer time and still request forgiveness for the entire amount, assuming we have the total required number of FTEs to qualify for forgiveness?
I don't think it changes the calculation. In other words, if you've got enough money that was going to be used in 8 weeks for all your employees, you're going to want to continue that. I think the 24 weeks was given for people who maybe they weren't open right away. And because if they're a restaurant and the county's not allowing them to open and they've got to wait a longer period of time, it gives them a longer period of time to basically get everybody back. But the issue is still, you still have to, I think it's got to be all your employees for whatever time frame you have to use the money, basically, within that 24 weeks.
Okay, so the rules and policies are still the same. It just from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, like Harold said, some places has not been lifted the ban, still not open. So that's why extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, correct?
Yeah, so for instance, I've got a couple clients that are restaurants that have kind of pretty much shut down. So they got PPP money. It's just sitting in a bank account waiting for the approval to open back up for him to bring his people back.
So now they have a longer time to
Correct.
use that. Okay. Next, shall we fill up forgiveness application for the advance money, 10,000 from the SBA? What are the requirements?
All right.
I'm not sure this is idle or doesn't
Yeah,
say.
it's idle. It's for
It's
idle.
idle, right? Uh-huh.
All right. So idle has been closed for, well, actually almost 4 weeks now because they received 5.8 million applications from across the country with limited human resources. Okay. And so right now, the only people that can apply are businesses that are in the agricultural business. And that's it. What they're trying to do is actually catch up from all of those applications that they have to process. So at this point, idle is closed down. And we're not sure when they're going to actually open the portal back up again. I will state that there is still funding for idle because all the money hasn't been used. But when you have 5.8 million applications, that's a lot of applications to try to process.
Yeah, it is a lot. Is cost of labor, independent contractor payments, forgiveness?
Well, independent contractors should not be counted in your payroll figure because independent contractors can actually apply for the PPP program on their own, right? Because they're 1099s, they're not W-2 employees. So hopefully you didn't include them, and I hope that your banker, if you did include them as part of your employee count, that your banker caught it and assisted you with making the adjustment.
Correct. Can you please post contact phone numbers, please? Yeah, if you need contact, please email AACC's office. We will post AACC's office. And then Sherilyn just put her contact information there. And
So did Harold.
yeah, Harold can also put that too. Next question. When we filed for our loan, we stated a total of 26 of employees. After our application, one employee had a stroke and could not work, and 2 employees decided not to work due to fears of the virus and filed for unemployment. I am going to be using the full amount of our loan for payroll, but will the 3 employees mentioned above cause a portion of our money to be unforgiven?
Well, the question is, for those 3 employees that left, are you going to now rehire 3 new employees since you have open positions? And if you do, then it becomes a moot point.
Are raises allowed to employees? The increase, I guess, increase the pay. Are raises allowed to employees?
And Harold, you probably would better answer this. Instead of raising their pay, then I'd probably just go ahead and bonus it, give them a bonus and call it hazard pay, if you will, or a retention bonus. I'd much rather see them get money that way right now under the program than to actually raise their pay. Harold, you may have a different opinion.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay. Can you please explain how you compare FTE? Is it day we apply for forgiveness?
No, it's going to be, there's a couple different periods you can use, but it's basically, one of them is your average full-time equivalents, basically January 1 through January and February.
Right.
And then you're going to compare that with the end of the cover period, which I believe the law now changed to December 31st. But Originally, it was June 30th. So you were going to compare that beginning period to June 30th in order to determine whether you had to have a reduction in your forgivable amount or not.
Okay, next question. If we applied for forgiveness and didn't meet the requirement for whatever reason, can we adjust the forgiveness application at a later time? Or is this once and done process?
See, I'm inclined to say that if you don't meet the forgiveness process, then it's a loan, baby. It's a loan.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, then it's not a grant, right?
Yeah, I think that if the question is you submit your application and the bank has questions and you didn't provide enough documentation, my belief is the bank will ask you for more documentation rather than just deny your application. But if you didn't actually meet the requirements, there is no later time to be adjusted. It's basically a loan.
Yes.
So just do it right in the beginning. Yeah, once. Should the 10,000 advance from the SBA should be used for payroll, or it does not matter? Or, well, this is, I guess, a idle loan
It's idle.
that we mentioned earlier.
It's $1,000 per employee for your employees, not to pay anything else. It's for the employee.
Will the recording of this recording of this meeting be available to share? Yes, we will record this. This meeting presentation has been recorded, and we will share afterwards. If employee applied for unemployment insurance and also receive unemployment insurance, can I pay this employee using PPP money?
All right, so they were on unemployment. You've called them back to work, then immediately they go off of unemployment, and now you're paying them using your PPP money. But they can't have both.
Okay,
So once you call them back, they're on your payroll. And unemployment stops at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. Can we spend more than 60%, say 90% in payroll?
All right, so the minimum under the new law is minimum of 60%. So, if you want to use 100% of the money for payroll, or 90% or 80%, that's fine. I think what they're recognizing is that, some of those utilities may be more than, what your payroll is. And so now, instead of 25%, you can use 40% of the PPP money on what I call utilities and 60% on a minimum of 60% on payroll. But if you want to use 70%, 75, 80, 90, 100% on payroll, you can do that. The minimum is 60.
I still don't understand if we can spend the money for more than 8 weeks of payroll. I understand the time to spend. It has been extended to 24 weeks, but has the cost occur also changed, or are they still only 8 weeks?
You want to answer that, Harold?
Well, I think this we answered earlier. The rules and policy are still the same. 8 weeks to 24 weeks. It just extended for business are not ready to open and they have money sitting, PPP funding sitting in their account but cannot use. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's correct. I think that right now, until we get the new regulations to make sure they're not changing other aspects of it, the rest of the regulations right now stay the same as they are. You're just going to have 24 weeks to use the money.
PPP can be forgiven if it used to pay employees within 8 weeks. Is there a timeline string attached for using idle under 10,000 to be given? I think we also answered that. It's a similar question.
Remember, the idle is an advance that's forgivable, $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So you don't have to do anything with that. And you get that whether or not you're approved for the idle loan. So it's strictly a forgivable grant up to $10,000.
And do they use that money on the payroll? Or they can use?
No, it's for payroll. That's
Okay.
why the formula specifically.
Okay, next question. Can funds be used on new employees if all employees' hours were reduced or the old employees are no longer working? Also, if I've been approved for a PPP loan but haven't signed to receive it, should I apply for new application because the terms of the loan contain older language, 70% payroll, etc.? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hey, Stephanie, this is Hugo. Can you repeat the question? I think Rod is maybe offline. Was this a question for me?
Okay. Can funds be used on new employees if all employees' hours were reduced or the old employees are no longer working? Also, if I've been approved for a PPP loan but haven't signed it to receive it, should I apply for new application because the terms of the loan contain older language?
Well, so the purpose of PPP loan is to maintain workforce. So if your old employee left or quit or decide to be unemployment, yes, you can use this money to hire a new employee to maintain workforce and payroll. So that answers the first part of the question. The second part of the question was applying for a loan forgiveness. I'm not sure I kind of understand the question.
Yeah, I think he said have been approved for PPP loan, but have not signed to receive it.
Right.
I don't know. You said have not signed. When it's approved, then you should receive the funding.
Right. I think what they're referring to is the loan documents from the bank probably have the old terms in them. And my guess is that they just need to talk to the bank, because I would think they would probably update the note terms to match what the current process is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's 3:05 and we still have a lot of questions. I don't know, four of you can stay a little longer so we can read through the questions.
I have to hop off by 3:20.
Okay. We did not put the money we received in separate account, but the bank statement address all the ADP payment, rent payment, utility. What should we do?
Work with your bank, highlight the expense item. Next question.
Can PPP pay for the salary raise of the employees? I guess
I think we already talked about that one.
Yeah. The time to spend on PPP loan has been extended to 24 weeks, but how many payroll does it cover? The loan amount I receive is not enough to cover entire 24 weeks payroll. I guess we already answered this. It's not for you to cover 24 weeks. It's still 8 weeks. The 24 weeks is for whatever businesses has not opened. I received my PPP loan 4 weeks ago. The promissory note has the old terms, 1% interest, deferral period, maturity date. Do the new terms apply to us now? Should I get a new promissory note from the bank?
You know, I think we have to wait until the new interim ruling comes out with that.
Yeah.
We just have to wait because we don't know the answer to that at this moment.
Right.
We host 2 months paid interns. Can we include interns' payroll cost when we apply for PPP loan forgiveness?
If the applicant use intern payroll during the application, then is calculate part of the loan amount, then you should be able to use that loan amount for intern, paid internship. So if it's, I don't know, Rod.
Well, we're assuming it's a paid intern.
Right.
So you're saying that they're a part-time employee. So yes, they're part of the calculation.
We're currently paying health insurance premiums for our furloughed workers. Some have not worked since March 16. We have always paid premiums for employees unless they change to PPO or add dependents. Then they pay the premium difference. My question is, would the premiums that we incurred and pay for furloughed employees who have not worked count towards loan forgiveness cost? In our business, we lease multiple trucks to ship and pick up all the gear that is either being rented or sold by our company. That is a vital part of our business because we need these trucks to fulfill our orders. Does this mean that we can use the PPP funds to cover the lease bill associated with the trucks? Is this under the 40%? Within the 40%? But this is a lease bill, not the mortgage.
So is the question, can they use part of the PPP money for trucks to pay payments? No. I think we've been very clear on what the money is to be used for. Payroll, 60%, the other 40% for utilities, gas, electric, water, business internet, business telephone, interest on a commercial mortgage.
Yeah, mortgage payment, but not the lease bill.
No.
We use number of employees as per Form 941 and not FTE at certain time. How we fix it?
I mean, I assume they're talking about when they filled out the application, they just put the number of employees on there. I don't know that they necessarily have to fix it because when they do the forgiveness application, you're going to give them all the calculation information for the beginning and the end. So I don't think that the application, what was put on the application is going to impact their forgiveness. So I don't think they have to do anything.
Okay. If I'm unable to use the PPP funds within 24 weeks, can I hold onto the money and use as a loan? We would use for payroll and utilities, but may be used after 24 weeks.
Short answer is yes.
But you know, let me just state, I would have an issue with that because initially the program said 8 weeks that you were supposed to spend the money. It was just Friday that, the ruling changed that you have up until December 31st. So if I'm the banker, I would question why you couldn't spend the money when initially when you received it, you were supposed to spend it in 8 weeks. Now you're turning around and telling me you can't use it, you can't spend it in 24 weeks. What gives?
Okay. We will most likely use up the PPP loan amount 100% into payroll into 10-week period. Do we have to wait until 24 weeks is over to apply for forgiveness, or can we apply for forgiveness right after 10 weeks? I think we answered that. It's a practical matter. You can use whenever.
Let's wait for the interim ruling to come out and we'll be able to give a specific answer.
Okay, so just wait for a couple of days. Can we still submit for a loan forgiveness by the eighth week and not wait until the 24th week?
I mean, we'll know that when the new regs come out.
Yeah.
But
If our 24 weeks, I'm sorry, Sherilyn?
No.
Okay. If our 24 weeks deadline is for instance, November 30th, then after November 30th, we then can submit PPP forgiveness application. I mean, after real payroll occurred, then can file that forgiveness application online. We use ADP for payroll process. On ADP, they only can give actual payroll cost.
So what's the question, Stephanie? I wasn't sure what.
If it says if our 24 weeks deadline is for November 30th, then after November 30th, we can submit PPP forgiveness application. After real payroll occurred, then can file that forgiveness application online. We use ADP for payroll process. On ADP, they only can give actual payroll cost. I guess this is just need to follow the instruction.
Yeah.
Correct?
And I would also wait for the new revised application.
Okay. Since payroll time changed to 24 weeks, does that mean that the max of loan forgiveness is also now increased? Before it was 15,000 per employee for 100,000 max. Is it now triple that amount, 46,000 max? I guess there are a lot of people confused about 8 weeks and 24 weeks. But Harold explained, Rod or Harold, you want to explain again?
Rod, you want to take that one? I don't think it's been increased. The
Definitely not been
46,000.
increased.
It has not,
It's not.
right. It hasn't, right, exactly.
No,
it has not.
Definitely not.
Some pending deposits came into the account just before and or after the PPP loan amount is approved. And the funds are being used only for payroll and eligible expenses. Will that be okay when we apply for loan forgiveness?
Yes, that's fine. You just need to highlight those transactions on the bank statement.
We are currently paying health insurance premiums for our furlough workers. Some have now worked since March 16. We have always paid premiums for employees unless they change to PPO or add dependents, that they pay the premium difference. My question is, would the premium that we incurred and pay for furlough employees who have not worked count towards loan forgiveness cost? I think we answered that.
Yep.
Previously. Is the work compensation paid considered part of the payroll?
I always thought it was, Harold. Am I
think
wrong on that?
workers' comp is not included because that's an insurance-based thing.
Right.
That's right. Thank
Right.
you. Thank you. Yep, it is.
When to file forgiveness has to wait after 8 weeks or all funds run out when all actual payroll occurred. No assumption calculation on payroll for forgiveness application. When to file forgiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to wait to know for sure
Right.
on that.
Yeah. I think that's I don't know, did I read through all the questions? If you still have questions, you can email AACC. Cindy can give out the AACC contact information, and then we'll try to refer you to the right person. Okay, it's 3:18. We want to thank our panelists today. It's great answers, and hopefully you get your answers. And just wait for a couple days to see if there's a new modification revision come out for the new application, and then we can set up another webinar in the next week or two.
So Stephanie, one of the things that our own business owners may want to do is sign up at sba.gov/updates, put in their zip code, and they'll be able to receive updates on EIDL and PPP.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Cindy, do you have that information? Maybe you can post in the chat room or send an email to the registrants today. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for hosting.
Thank you.